Hi, good morning. This lecture is in preparation for exam 3, which will, let's see, exam 3 opens Wednesday, which is tomorrow, at 8 a.m. and closes on Friday at 11:59. Exam 3 opens the 18th and closes on Friday, the 20th, at the end of the day. Okay, my plan actually was to get this recorded yesterday, but I wasn't able to complete that due to several different circumstances. But you're getting it today, and you do have until Friday to take the third exam. Then there will not be a recording on Monday. So we'll go home for Thanksgiving, and then what will happen is we'll come back on the 30th, and I will begin recording for chapter 8 and 9. Now, I will tell you that I do supplement quite a bit, or I have in the past, for chapters 8 and 9 with information that is not on the PowerPoint. And you do not have it, most of it is not uploaded on Canvas. And so it will be very important for you to stay up with the lectures. Please don't wait till the last minute to try and prepare for this exam. There are some videos that I will ask that you view, and I will put those on Canvas, and I will probably make reference to them during a lecture as well. So that's how we will finish out the semester. So the last exam is not cumulative. But you might have a question or two about some information that we have already discussed, and that maybe several of you had difficulty with, or information that wasn't um, maybe understood, then there could be a question from earlier. So this is the lecture for review for the exam for tomorrow. Now, it is over chapter 5, 6, and 7, and I do believe I put that in my announcement on Canvas, so that shouldn't be a big surprise to you. But in chapter 5, there's very little that we're going to talk about. And what it entails is obtaining a language sample from a child, and the reason that you do that and what to think about. A language sample consists of at least 75 to 100 utterances. The child has to generate enough speech that you can analyze. You can't analyze 10 words. You have to have a large enough sample so that you can truly analyze and calculate the mean length of utterance for that child. And the language sample, excuse me, let me take a drink. Goodness. The language sample will tell us what the child knows about language. Now, you would just not take a language sample of a child that you didn't suspect could be delayed. You would be taking a language sample of a child that you needed to analyze their expressive language because you were concerned about areas of the language, whether it be semantics, the meaning, syntax, grammar, morphology, which is the smallest unit of meaning, prefixes and suffixes, phonology, the sound system, and pragmatics, that social language that we use. So what you're going to do is you're going to get the sample, and then you're going to count morphemes, and then you're going to divide, and it's going to give you the average number of words that that child is producing. Then what you do is you take that information and you compare it to a developmental milestone for that child's age. Now, remember, we don't have too many developmental checklists past 5 or 6. And the reason for that, hopefully you could answer that question if we were live. So I'll just throw that out there for some thought. Do you know why there aren't developmental checklists to compare that child's performance against their peers, or what is considered typical development? Do you know why you don't have anything for a 10-year-old? Think about it. Because that child should have everything in place. So what you do is if it's a 10-year-old that you're doing a language sample on, you go back and you look at a developmental checklist of a 5-year-old or a 6-year-old. And if the 10-year-old isn't matching every single one of those milestones, then you know that there could be a delay. So you're only going to be able to find the milestones up through about 5 or 6. So this sample is going to tell us what the child knows about language. So we are going to compare, which is maybe not always such a good thing, the child that you're considering, you're going to compare their performance against their peers. And that's what we do, is we have data that tells us what a typically developing child should be doing, what the phonemes should be, which phonemes should be present, which pronouns they should be using. They should be asking questions. They should be able to generate a sentence. It will tell you that kind of information. And we're comparing that child that you're concerned about with their peers. We are also going to be able to, if we've taken this sample some time ago, it told us based on the data and comparing the information what they need to work on. So maybe we wrote behavioral objectives, and those behavioral objectives are going to tell us how well they've done, what their progress is like. It will also give us information of what else we need to work on. So when you know typically developing skills and you generate a language sample, you know what where the child is performing and what you need to work on in your classroom. It's like the recipe. And sometimes children have so many needs that it is difficult to pinpoint where to even begin. How do we prioritize that? Well, that's a topic for another day. So 75 to 100% utterances is what you need. It makes it reliable. It becomes valid. We want it during one particular setting. We want only words that we can understand. If you can't understand a word, then how do you call it a word? We should not be asking too many questions. And that's something that I encourage my students who are in clinic to be careful of. If you do too much talking, the child doesn't have to say anything. You're saying it all. If you ask too many questions, you're either going to get yes, no, or depending on the age of the child, you may get no. And you're not going to get much speech because you're asking a question that probably only requires a short response. We want to record that sample because the child if you have a chatty child, you won't be able to remember what they've said. Also, I guarantee you that if the child says, uh, my mom went to store, your brain is going to correct that. And you may write it down as, my mom went to the store, when in reality, the child did not use the. Be careful, because your brain will correct it. You've had that experience, you know what your metalinguistic ability using cognition, academic performance, language, you know what it should be, and your brain will correct it. So be very careful. So you want to record that language sample so that you can go back and accurately transcribe it. Okay. We'll be counting morphemes when we are taking this language sample, the smallest unit of meaning. We will be looking at prefixes and suffixes and counting those up. And we'll divide, and that will give us their mean length of utterance. And, you know, language, even if the grammar isn't accurate, and some of our kiddos, the grammar isn't accurate. They're either delayed, they're still learning, their home environment wasn't stimulating, they didn't go to preschool or kindergarten for whatever reason. But the whole crux of language, the whole purpose, probably the most important part is the meaning. Can they convey the meaning? Can they convey enough to get their wants and their needs met? That's an important component for our kids. So that's all I want to say about chapter 5. It's just about the language sample. In past semesters, what I've done is I've asked students to find a child between the ages of 3 and 10, plan activities, go to the child's home or whatever, get permission from their parents, and take a language sample. And we've not been able to do that because of the pandemic. So you would have taken that recording, you would have written the transcription, and you would have written a paper over the 5 areas of language: syntax, semantics, morphology, pragmatics, and I'm forgetting one, phonology, I think. So, and unfortunately, you haven't been able to do that. It's a really good project. Students may not think so, but it really is a good project. All right, now we're going to talk about chapter 6, and this is language through the preschool years. We have talked about Brown's stages of syntactical development. You should know what syntactical development means. By now, it's grammar. So we're looking at that child's grammar to indicate where they are in their development. Stage 2 of Brown's syntactical development says that modulations of meaning is the greatest change in stage 2, and that's because kiddos are beginning to use grammatical morphemes. Stage 2 is 2.5 to almost 3. 2.5 to 3. We are hearing morphemes. We know that when they start to read and spell, that morphology really takes off, and their ability to express themselves is done so with clarity because they're able to use those morphemes. So, in chapter 6, I think that, again, Brown suggests the greatest change, the most significant change, the best. Those are key words that tells you that's a potentially an important piece of information, and it may end up on an exam. You will need to have information and knowledge on anaphoric reference and what that is, the difference between a phrase and a sentence, what makes a sentence. Make sure that you understand the significance of some age ranges, not necessarily for Brown's syntactical development, but uh, for example, between 18 months and 6 years, the child adds an average of how many words every day. And that's pretty significant because we certainly aren't doing that now. You may, if you're studying a new topic and it has some relationship to science, because we know there are a lot of vocabulary words and important meanings with those words for kids. So make sure that you're looking at that. And even though I'm making comments about some of this information specifically, I would encourage you to read through all of those PowerPoint slides. I can't tell you every area to prepare for. If that were the case, I would give you an open book test, which I don't really think is the best thing to do. So I'm highlighting some areas, and then you still have that responsibility to look at the other information. We know that kiddos are talking more in stage 2. We know that they're beginning to repeat and to change words. We have information on narratives and what narratives do for a child, beginning, middle, and end, a plot. It helps them to learn to write a paragraph. These are real early stages. Metalinguistics, make sure you review what metalinguistics is. Turn taking is kind of an interesting concept in terms of its relationship to language. Conversation should be turn taking. You will be playing the role of a listener or a speaker, and the person that you're engaging with will also play the role of a speaker or a listener. And so children have to learn that turn taking. And in clinic, when we know that we have a child who is delayed in their language and doesn't seem to understand turn taking, we'll start turn taking activities with a ball, with cars, with sharing toys. That turn taking, your turn, my turn. That's a prerequisite that we like to see before the child really gets into a lot of language, and teaching them that it's a give and take, because there are pauses, there are indicators of when we know the conversation is finished, when the conversation should continue. That's a pragmatic component. So we know that there are subtleties within our body language and what we say and our mannerisms that give us a lot of knowledge about turn taking. Literacy, review the information on literacy and the significance of literacy and academic success. Phonological awareness is a big one. Make sure you've reviewed those PowerPoints or you've reviewed that information in your textbook. You cannot separate intellectual growth from language development. cognition and language. Review figurative language, review WH words. I think one component, I had a parent the other day say, I want him to be able to say his name when someone asks, and I want him to be able to say his age when somebody asks him how old he is. And this child has a diagnosis of ASD, autism spectrum disorder, and you have to understand or have a good concept of time before answering when questions. And this child certainly isn't developmentally there. So asking this child, how old are you, is not probably going to give you the answer that you want. And many times, because I have seen this done, you'll ask a child, what is your name? Well, what develops early? So they can answer that one. And when you say, how old are you? How old are you? Which is time. They stop and they pause, and you can see the wheels turning, and then you'll get their name again. They know they answered the first question, and maybe you didn't get it, so they're going to say it again. So how, when, make sure that the child is developmentally ready to answer some of those questions. The figurative language, idioms, the information on bilingualism, the productive bilingual, the receptive bilingual, and what it means. With our children who come into the classroom or who come in for therapy, we have to make sure that we're not placing children inappropriately. If they speak very little English and they are suddenly placed into your classroom, you're the teacher, that doesn't mean, because they don't speak much English, that they have a language delay. The language delay has to be in both languages, their native language and the second language. So the second language that they're learning is English, and maybe their first language is, it could be Spanish, it could be Mandarin, who knows? But just because the child doesn't speak the language in the classroom doesn't mean they have a language delay. What it means, maybe, is they have a language difference. And that's just that they haven't had an opportunity to learn the language yet. So we have to be really careful how we label them, or label them maybe. Um, they will need special tutoring, or they certainly need to have their classroom information presented to them in their native language. For these kids to be successful, the literacy component has to be within their native language. And that's sometimes easier said than done to put into place. Okay, that looks like it's pretty good for chapter 6. Then we're going to move on to chapter 7. And I know some of you have been sending me emails about when the review is going to take place. And again, I apologize for that. I fully expected to be able to get that done yesterday, and Mondays and Tuesdays are my busiest days, and it just didn't happen. Okay, let's look at chapter 7, and this is language from home to school. Now, you will never ever know what happens in that child's home, more than likely. And you never know what happened right before they walked into your classroom. So if they're having a bad day, they're tired, they're hungry, they're out of sorts, Give them a break. Think about, okay, what happened? And they may not want to talk about it, and you can't make them talk about it. But just keep in mind, if they're having an off day, they're entitled to an off day. You're entitled to an off day. I think I'm having an off day today. But just make sure that you have some perspective of uh, what they may encounter at home and how it affects them when they come to school. So we wouldn't expect a child coming to school to have better language abilities, language skills, better than what they're exposed to at home. The language models, that's what they're going to learn from. That's what they're bringing to the classroom. Now, not all children have a preschool uh, experience. Not all children go to kindergarten. It's not mandatory. I do not believe in the state of Indiana yet. Could be wrong, but if their first experience in school is the first grade, think about what they've missed out on. So keep in mind those language skills may not be very good because they haven't had that opportunity. So the language skills are not going to be any better. We can't expect them to be any better than what they've been exposed to. And the language at school is very different than any place else. Wilhelm, in his research and publication of 1994, suggests that schools are the dominant force in the socialization of children once they go to school. And think about how much time they spend at school. Things are very different for them. So, review, and I would look seriously at a lot of this information because there are several questions about different strategies of teaching, the different stages of spelling, the significance of writing. So I certainly would look this over thoroughly. Um, the significance of learning English for a child who has a different language as their primary language. So the classroom curriculum and in the language that's being used must be something that they understand. So cultural diversity is a big issue. Make sure you review the 3 forms of language that children encounter in the classroom and those different models or formats for instruction. That information is on the exam. Um, the influences, primary influences that impact acquiring words. Vocabulary development, I would review that. Strategies for word retrieval. This is interesting because I have a student in clinic right now who's working with an adult who had a CVA, cerebral vascular accident, in, it's, I don't know, maybe not over a year ago. And so this individual, the damage that has been done in the brain is impacting word retrieval. And so these strategies used in word retrieval certainly are strategies that we're relying heavily on in therapy. There's a little bit about figurative language there. Um, Gender differences in conversations, the different ways that parents talk to their children, to their daughters, to their sons, the types of behaviors and topics that we see girls utilizing, boys utilizing. the narratives. I already mentioned the metalinguistics. What's interesting too with metalinguistics, and um, you may be in a conversation with someone, and you may ask, "Oh, does your child go to Muncie Central?" And the response, "No, he don't go there." And hopefully you immediately pick up on the fact that that's syntactically not correct. He don't go there. He do not go there. And hopefully you know how to correct that. He does not go there. He doesn't. And your ability to relate to cognitive development, intellectual capacity, scholastic achievement, your ability to read, the environmental factors, all of those things play into your ability to identify when something is incorrect. So hopefully you picked up on that. There's a little information about phonological awareness in Chapter 7. I would look at that because I did tell you in Chapter 6 to review phonological awareness. um, Humans are born to speak. We're wired to speak, but not genetically predisposed to read and write. That's environmental. Let's see. Reading fluency. I would review that. The 3 types of readers, make sure that you go over that. I would review the slides on writing. And the stages of learning to spell. So that's what you need to review in a nutshell. I've highlighted a lot, but I certainly have not covered everything. So you still need to review those slides and possibly even supplement with reviewing in the information in the text. Okay, the test opens tomorrow at 8 o'clock. You will have that lockdown Respondus monitor in place. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we'll get into the last 2 chapters, and there will be some supplemental information as you prepare for the final. Alrighty, I will be here the rest of the week, and I will be here Monday and Tuesday, and then I will be back on Thursday. I sincerely hope you have a wonderful Thanksgiving. Be safe. Continue to wear your mask and social distance. We know it's up on the rise, and we're approaching flu season, and just be safe. Okay? All right. That is all for today. Good luck on the exam.